Let's go now to federal Liberal MP, the member for Higgins in Melbourne. She joins us from Canberra. Katie Allen, thanks for joining us, Katie. What is going on here with Brett Sutton not turning up, the Premier and others focused on whether the media should be chasing him for answers? I mean, he's obviously given conflicting information to the inquiry.
I know we get very mixed messages, don't we, Chris, with regards to Premier Andrews. He talks about, I'm completely responsible, I'm in charge, and then when he's asked in the inquiry or by the press, he says, well, I can't answer that question or I don't know the answer. So he kind of treats us a bit like we're dim-witted, which I find quite extraordinary. And the fact that, you know, he still comes out each and every day, and then we're seeing all these sort of explosive emails of misleading by different members of his administration or by the bureaucracy. We're also seeing ministers with the Coates inquiry prepared to say, I don't know, and they seem to think the public will be happy with that. And then we have the media actually pursuing what everyone wants to know. What has happened with this hotel quarantining fiasco, the largest public health fiasco in this country's history, costing us literally billions of dollars, is costing Victorians lives, and it's also putting us all in lockdown. So I just can't believe that he thinks he can get away with this.
Well, Brett Sutton told the inquiry that he found out private security was being used at hotel quarantine from the media. He found out, he said, only when problems arose and through the media. Yet emails show he was told about this back in late March. Emails also show that he was supposed to be in charge of this. And we also learned today that he tried to stop those emails going to the inquiry. Surely his position is untenable and Daniel Andrews ought to get rid of him now.
Well, the old saying, power corrupts absolutely. We've had a government that seems to feel that it can completely control every single thing that we do. We've been locked up for 23 hours out of 24 hours for weeks, if not months on end, and they seem to think that they can mislead the public. I think it's quite extraordinary.
Should Brett Sutton resign, and if he doesn't, should Daniel Andrews sack him?
Well, I think that actually this all stops. The buck stops with Daniel Andrews. We're seeing someone who does seem to have his priorities very much mixed up. When we're hearing about what's happened with Cox Plate, 4 hours later it was overturned.
Well, I'll come to that in a moment, but we've seen this misleading evidence from Professor Brett Sutton. We know what an important job he's got in Victoria. Given this misleading information and on the face of it, efforts to stop the information going to the inquiry, isn't his position untenable?
I would say that you're absolutely right. On the face of it, this looks very, very serious because at the end of the day, trust and integrity is what we expect from our bureaucrats who are advising our key leaders. And if he's not showing that trust and integrity to the public, then we do have serious concerns. Let's wait and see what he's responsive, and he has 1 week to respond to the Coates inquiry. There must be a please explain. It can't be, oh, I forgot about it. That's just not and absolutely not acceptable. So let's see what he comes back with. But absolutely, trust and integrity is a very important part about advice, and we expect the bureaucrats and health officials to be providing that. That's what the public expect.
Katie Allen, you've got a background in public health. You're experienced and qualified in this area. How can there be medical advice that allows the government to say 500 people can turn up at the races at the same time the government is telling people they can't get together to watch the footy?
I think that the Victorian public made it very clear that they are really upset by this decision that seems, you know, to have come out of the blue and then have to be reversed. And it shows that the decision making is probably, you know, not as balanced as we would like it to be. If you can't go to work or church and yet 500 people can turn up to watch their horse race, it just seems the priorities are all wrong.
Well, the fact the decision was made and then overturned, it proves they're not making decisions based on medical grounds, doesn't it? It exposes that lie. These are political decisions.
That's exactly what's happening. I think that so many of these decisions that have been made seem to be politically driven. I'd like to see much more, you know, a much more rounded, balanced approach. And I'm hearing from my constituents that they want to see how to open up quickly. So in some ways, you know, having people outside isn't a problem. 500 people seems a dramatic increase in numbers, while we've had these baby steps about things that are incredibly important for businesses, livelihoods and people's mental health, and yet suddenly someone who wants to go and watch their horse race, you can have 500 people. It's extraordinary extremes. And what I worry about is the balance in the judgment, the prioritisation of what's important for people's sense of well-being, but also for their businesses. Suddenly to get this quite extreme response, it just shows a lack of balance. And I worry that the Premier is coming out day after day and answering questions which he seems to be just avoiding answering the real questions. We have to wait till someone asks a really tough question before he actually seems to then get defensive and push back on it. And then he does things like, say that Josh Frydenberg is a liberal as a criticism. I mean, there seems to be very much a politicisation of these media events. They're almost mesmerising for how political they've come, rather than talking about the public health message, rather than talking about how he's going to open up in a COVID-safe way, rather than talking about the consistency of messaging so we're not all confused and there's not all these memes going around about the sort of inconsistency of what he's actually telling us. He is losing the trust of the Victorian people. He's eroding the trust in governance and public health messaging. That is a bad place for the Premier to be.
Katie Allen, thanks for joining us.